here, as it sounds like we have a couple more people joining us. I want to say welcome to everybody to Pacific Science Center. My name is Brett, and I'll be your host and moderator for tonight's event. Just a few bits about the structure of tonight. Our speakers will probably speak about 40-45 minutes. There's pieces of paper being handed out, which I'll get to those who are coming in late. We have a reflection, question, and activity for you to do, so your participation is wanted. After their talk, we'll switch right into the Q&A, and all told, we should be out of here about 8:30, 9 o'clock tonight, so thank you for joining us. A reminder that on the second Tuesday of every month, please join us here at Pacific Science Center for the Global Health and Development Lecture Series. This is part of our Science in the City program, which I run. These events highlight the amazing individuals and organizations in our region who are working on innovative and ambitious and scalable solutions to address health problems that have a major impact in developing countries. And this is a series that is sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, so thank you for joining us and thank you to them for sponsoring and making these free for everybody. If you are not a member with us, those members in the audience, thank you. These free events are actually free all across the board, so any other Science in the City, it's free part of your membership. I encourage you guys to look into it. Really quickly, if you do need to leave at any time, you can do so either through the doors that you came through or through the doors on your left. They're hidden camouflaged wooden doors. Head out into the hallway, head all the way outside, and then downstairs, so into the courtyard. That's where you'll find the restrooms. Head back on up, either come through the doors that you originally entered in, or back through those camouflage doors. The next regularly scheduled Science in the City, Global Health Science in the City lecture will be on Tuesday, April 9th at 7 p.m. Please join us and Dorothea Kodu, CEO of Pilgrim Africa, as she shares the work that she and her team are doing to not only help in the eradication of malaria in Uganda, but how their efforts are helping to educate the country's youth and provide agricultural innovations to help lift their communities out of poverty. Again, that's Tuesday, April 9th. Our February 12th event that was rescheduled because of the snow, that has been rescheduled to April 2nd, and that is with the Max Foundation, so it'll be talking about cancer. So I hope to see some of you there as well. So I am delighted tonight to introduce you to a couple of our speakers here from Splash, Kara Guel and Kelbessa Wordofa, for addressing the urban global water crisis. And I'll read their bios and then I'll have them join us here at the podium. So Kara has spent the past 11 years managing international development programs in Africa and Asia. After earning her BA and MA from Boston College, she coordinated large public health projects for Boston-based global health firm John Snow, not the one that you're thinking of. A different John Snow, a more impressive John Snow, I would say. The father of epidemiology. You should look it up. Kara has been with Splash since 2014, most recently leading Splash's global program quality team, focusing on the rollout of water, sanitation, and hygiene, the WASH program, standards, as well as developing Splash's monitoring, learning, and evaluation framework. Kara is currently the global deputy director of Project WISE, Splash's 5-year initiative to reach 100% of government schools in Kolkata, India, and Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, with WASH products and services. Our other speaker is Kelbessa Wordofa, who has 20 years of experience in the nonprofit sector managing development, recovery, and response programs in East Africa and the Middle East countries, including his own country of Ethiopia. Over those 20 years, Kelbessa has worked for international NGOs, including Save the Children, World Vision, and TIER, Fund UK, and held senior positions. He has rich experience in the planning and delivery of programs in sectors of food security and livelihoods, WASH, health, nutrition, education, and protection. He joined Splash in February, as in this last February, that I just recognized, so it's been a couple months, as Director of Project WISE in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. So at this time, join me in welcoming Kara to the podium.
Thanks, Brett. Good evening, everyone. As Brett said, I'm Kara, Deputy Director for Programs and for Project WISE at Splash, which I'll be speaking a little bit more about soon. I'm delighted to be here with my colleague Kelbessa, who just flew in from Addis Ababa this weekend. Not just for this event, but we will pretend that that is the case. We're very lucky to have him here with us in Seattle for the next few weeks working on our programs together. So Splash is a Seattle-based nonprofit organization with the vision that every child should have the clean water, hygiene, and sanitation they need to be healthy and thrive. This is particularly critical in today's world, given that according to the UN report on Sustainable Development Goal 6, which is the follow-on to the Millennium Development Goals that some of you may have heard of, clean water and sanitation for all. As of 2018, there were still 2.1 billion people without access to safe drinking water and 2.3 billion people without access to sanitation facilities. So what is WASH? What does this mean? Do any of you know what WASH means? Anyone? There you go. Water, sanitation, and hygiene, but I would say that health is a perfect word to add in here because it's all for the purpose of health. So I'm going to actually go back to work and recommend that we change it. You may or may not know already about the critical relationship between water, sanitation, and hygiene in preventing the spread of disease and promoting health. Today, 1 in 9 people lack access to safe water, and 1 in 3 people lack access to a toilet. In fact, raise your hand if you have a toilet at your house. And raise your hand if you have a cell phone. Okay, so it seems about an even relationship here in this particular group. But if you were a representative sample of people around the world, many more of you would have raised your hand when questioned about the cell phone, because more people around the globe have a mobile phone than have a toilet. Furthermore, hand washing with soap before eating and after using the toilet, the most critical behavior that we're taught from the time that we are young, is not yet practiced widely or consistently. And I would say that's probably true for the United States just as well as everywhere else across the world. In fact, Brett let me know that there's a exhibit on proper hand washing practices here at the Pacific Science Center. So if you want to learn more about proper hand washing, there's multiple resources for doing so. However, the consequences of all of this are very severe. The problem. The global economic damage of poor sanitation is estimated at a staggering $260 billion per year, with people in developing nations bearing the brunt of this burden and inequality. Diarrhea caused by dirty water, poor sanitation, and a lack of hygiene kills 800,000 people every year, including more children under the age of 5 than HIV/AIDS, malaria, and measles combined. Under the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the global community has committed and resolved to fix this and achieve safe wash, water, sanitation, and good hygiene for all people by 2030. And the key word there is really all people. I'll talk more about why that matters in a moment. So what comes to your mind when you hear the term global water crisis? I'd actually like to give you a minute to maybe turn to a neighbor and just tell them what you think of when you think of the global water crisis. There is no right answer here, but I'm just curious what comes to your mind when you hear this term. So I'll give you a moment to chat amongst yourselves. There's no right answer. Great. Would anybody like to share what they heard, what their neighbor shared with them, or maybe what they shared?
Mass migration.
Mass migration. Very interesting. Why does that come to your mind?
Well, it's the drought and the lack of sanitation, so people move to try to keep their babies alive.
Absolutely. People are moving. Anybody else?
Pollution.
Pollution. Any other ideas?
Lowering water tables.
Lowering water tables, absolutely. Great. Before I started at Splash 4.5 years ago, this is what I thought of. I thought of her. An impoverished girl, or sometimes a mother or an older woman, traveling a long journey through a rural village, typically, usually on a dirt road, carrying a big bucket of water on her head. This was a very specific image that I had when I thought of the global water crisis, based on what I'd seen in popular media and my work in the past. So this is the type of image that comes to mind for some when they think of the global water crisis. At Splash, we think of this little girl. A young girl in Kolkata, India, accessing contaminated water in an urban slum. So some of the things that I heard mentioned here today, pollution, migration, and whatnot. The landscape of poverty is shifting. When Splash was founded 10 years ago, right here in Washington State, actually down the road in Tacoma, but we are now based here in Seattle. When Splash was founded 10 years ago, it was the first year in the world's history that more people lived in cities than in the countryside. However, by 2050, which suddenly seems not so far off in the future, 70 to 75% of the world's population will live in cities. This is a drastic change. Every week, 3 million people, 3 million of the world's poorest people, for the most part, migrate into cities globally, looking for new educational and economic opportunities. Slums and informal settlements, more often than not, act as the landing pad for this rapid flow of migrants, and thus, the concentration and volume of these communities is growing exponentially. It's continuing to shift. When migrants arrive in these cities, they find undeniable inequality. With slum neighborhoods divided from the wealthy, their water-fed lawns and their pristine swimming pools. This is the largest slum in Mumbai, India, called Dharavi. It houses nearly 1 million people per square mile. So let's zoom in to see more. We'll get a little closer. And even closer. Let's take a look at the street level. This is what we see. This is what Splash sees. This is not an exaggeration, but rather sadly the norm in these slums. Among the myriad of challenges facing people who live in urban poverty is the lack of access to clean drinking water and sanitation services. Given the rapid population growth and urbanization, many governments also struggle to provide equitable wash services to urban communities. They can't figure out how to reach them, how to provide sustainable solutions to these complex problems. The UN reports that children in slum and resource-poor neighborhoods significantly lag behind in health and education. We'll talk a little bit more about that during this hour together. So poor wash conditions have serious consequences for children in particular. They're the most vulnerable to the impact of waterborne diseases. Children are very vulnerable due to the transmission of diarrheal disease and acute respiratory infection, with associated impacts on nutrition, child development, and family health, and also due to reductions in school attendance, due to illness and the lack of adequate sanitation facilities for girls, especially girls who are of menstruation age. So if you think of what makes you feel comfortable and confident using a toilet anywhere in Seattle or anywhere that you visited, these are the same common problems that impact kids around the world, and I think especially girls. We have particular needs when it comes to the toilets that we choose to use. Among children under 14, more than 20% of deaths and years lived with disabilities are attributable to unsafe water, inadequate sanitation, and insufficient hygiene. We did a survey, and we culled existing resources and found that among children aged 7 to 14 in India, 21% of girls and 16% of boys are out of school. Meanwhile, only 51% of girls in India and 56% of girls in Ethiopia, another place we work, attend secondary school. So that's the equivalent of high school. Here we see a picture from Nepal, and you can see people trying to access clean, safe drinking water from a tanker truck. Like this, many of the solutions, the current solutions to solving the urban wash crisis aren't working because they don't scale. This right here is not a sustainable nor a scalable solution for growing populations. Here we see a child gathering water in unhygienic urban conditions. Here too, dirty water is being used for personal consumption, including cooking and cleaning. This is a common scene in many of the megacities where Splash works, and perhaps where some of you have visited and seen firsthand. But fortunately, this is where my tone changes, and really where Splash best resides. Amidst this chaos, this seeming chaos, if you look really close, there is a lot of opportunity. So thinking through the lens of opportunity, which is of course why we're here, to learn and to be optimistic about what can be done to solve these problems, I'd like to ask all of you to think for a moment about something that you think every slum has in common. Again, there's no right answer here, but think about it. What is something that every slum has?
Light.
What's that?
Light.
Yes, exactly.
People,
People.
garbage,
Garbage.
Strong social bonds.
Very strong social bonds. Tight-knit communities. Stores and noise. Kids running everywhere. And schools. Every slum has schools. Be it a one-room shack or a tall, crowded building, schools are found in urban slum communities around the world. Over the last decade of working to help solve the water quality crisis in cities across the world, Splash has seen one of our program areas really take off, our program in schools. We've come to the belief, that the most effective way to long-term health gains for kids, while also altering the long-range trajectory of these cities, starts in schools. Let me show you what I mean. This drone footage, taken somewhat illicitly by the Splash founder Eric on a recent trip to India. This is Kolkata, India, and this school, Manu Memorial, is one that Splash has been working in for 6 years. Within a 10-kilometer radius, there are nearly 2,000 other schools serving the poorest families, and within just 10 blocks, several dozen other schools. So for Splash, this is key towards making a dent in the global wash crisis. In most cities, schools are situated right in the greatest pockets of poverty. So we started to ask ourselves, what would it look like to work from the ground up, serving kids first and their communities second, rather than traditional top-down approaches that cost billions and take decades to implement? So this is the approach that Splash is now focused on. Because schools are embedded in communities of urban poverty, we believe they present an effective way to reach many people at once, and especially to reach kids who are most vulnerable to the diseases that we're trying to counter. Through schools, we have the additional opportunity to secure health gains, teach new ideas, promote long-term behavioral change, and to influence kids who, in turn, influence their families and communities and grow up to be influencers in these communities. To bring it all together, I'd like to share a brief video that highlights Splash's approach in schools.
The face of poverty is shifting. The poorest of the poor don't always live where you think, and we aren't the charity you think. In 2007, our world reached a tipping point. More people live in cities than anywhere else. By 2050, 75% of the world's population will be city dwellers, and the world's developing nations struggle to keep pace. When 1 billion people live in slums, and hundreds of millions lack access to clean water or sanitation, we cannot afford to ignore the future of water in cities. The hardest to reach are not always the furthest away. There is increased opportunity in the new urban landscape. More people in the same place means we can reach more people more efficiently, starting with schools. Schools are everywhere. They serve as a critical and efficient access point for water, sanitation, and influence hygiene behavior in kids, teachers, parents, and the entire community. But access to clean water isn't enough. We improved sanitation facilities and built new toilets where needed. We empower young generations to make personal hygiene a priority so they can then empower the next generation and the next one and the next. By combining water, sanitation, and hygiene, we make the greatest impact on health and development. But what happens when an outside organization comes into a city to help it, then leaves? We are helping redefine the word charity. We believe charity is a means, not an end. So we begin with the end in mind. We partner with local governments and local businesses to combine new thinking with existing resources to create locally rooted, sustainable solutions, and ultimately, hand over the reins. In our first 10 years, we now serve over 400,000 children daily across 8 countries with our proven model. We've achieved safe water in every orphanage in China, and our sights are set on 100% of public schools in Addis Ababa, Kolkata, and Kathmandu. By 2023, we aim to be reaching 1 million children a day with clean water, clean hands, clean toilets, and to leave behind strong local organizations. Because if we are still needed, then we haven't solved the problem. Together, let's shift society where communities will expect, demand, and obtain safe water and decent toilets as a basic human right. Join us.
So there you have a brief peek into Splash's approach in schools. We always start with safe water. This is really Splash's bread and butter, where we've come from and where we're going, but adding on other components as well. When it comes to safe drinking water, Splash cleans the water by installing commercially proven filtration technology that uses high-quality, durable materials. The majority of the time, we're tapping into an existing municipal supply water line. What do I mean by commercially proven? I mean that this is the same water filtration technology that you might find at a McDonald's or a major hotel corporation around the world. So the supply chain already exists, but it may not be extended to the benefit of the poor. This system removes more than 99.99% of microbial pathogens to ensure that water is safe for anyone and everyone to drink. This is extremely important in places like Kolkata, India, where Splash recently conducted a citywide water quality test and found that the water at 70% of schools tested positive for total coliform, which is usually an indication of additional problems, and found that 56% of schools were positive for E. coli. I don't even want to imagine what would happen if that were the headline in the Seattle Times tomorrow. Safe drinking water shouldn't just be for paying customers at fast food chains and hotels. We then add child-friendly drinking and hand-washing stations made from durable materials. Durability really is key. Anybody who has a child probably already knows that things take a beating. And at some of these schools, we have upwards of 2,000 to 3,000 students using this infrastructure on a given day. So these stations need to really be able to take a beating. We also focus on design. Bright colors that attract kids, and subtle behavior nudges, as we call them, that get kids closer to our hand-washing stations. In this case, using mirrors above the hand-washing stations has led to a dramatic increase of usage of the hand-washing stations. So more kids are coming to the hand-washing stations and washing their hands with soap because they want to look at themselves and play in the mirrors. Now, I have a 6-month-old and he already enjoys looking at himself in the mirror. We figured out that, much like adults, babies, kids are vain, and we really need to capitalize on this to help improve their behaviors. It's very tricky. They don't know that's why we're doing it. This photo is of Addis Ababa, where Splash recently discovered that only 10% of schools have access to soap for hand washing. So soap provision is a huge component of our project and one that we really live and die on in terms of efficacy and success. We help the schools host an annual soap drive, we call it, whereby each child is asked to bring 1 bar of soap at the start of the school year. We found that that is enough for the school to have enough soap for the entire year. So each year the schools do an annual soap drive. This provides enough soap for the school and also is a great way to engage parents and communities in our efforts. In addition to providing the appropriate hand washing infrastructure, Splash also builds out the environment for child-to-child training, which is essential for socializing new behavior in schools. Kids influence other kids. We need to use peer pressure to our advantage. We further ensure that all materials are locally appropriate and friendly and fun. We rely on lots of songs and games and stories. I was just talking to my colleague about the hand-washing song that we have been teaching in all of the schools in Addis because it's a really catchy tune that stays in my head. Unfortunately, I don't speak any Amharic, so I can't remember the words. It's kind of just like an earworm. That is always in my head. I never thought of toilets as fun. Maybe fun isn't important for sanitation, but functional certainly is. We ensure that all schools have clean, safe, and private toilet facilities with proper lighting, ventilation, and water for flushing, as well as doors that lock and close. This is especially important for girls to feel comfortable and safe using the bathrooms at schools. In Addis, we found that only 57% of girls' toilets at schools across the city had lockable doors, and only 7% had any water for flushing or personal cleaning. 86% of girls' toilets had no special provisions, such as a wastebasket, for menstrual hygiene management. As a result, 42% of students we surveyed reported feeling uncomfortable or unable to use the toilet during school due to the unhygienic conditions. Meanwhile, in Kolkata, India, we found that 33% of school toilets across the city had no water for flushing, 34% had no lighting or ventilation, 35% had no door or lock for privacy, and the vast majority, 91%, had no facilities for the management of menstrual waste. This data has very much informed our newest approach around toilets. So Splash not only works with schools and governments to improve the infrastructure, the hardware at schools, and promote behavior change, we also ensure that the investments last by connecting schools to long-term dedicated maintenance support networks. These could be networks that internal, Splash providing long-term support for schools, or ideally building out that long-term maintenance network within the cities themselves. UNICEF reports that 30 to 50% of global wash projects fail after 2 to 5 years. I mean, if you really take a step back and think about the investments that are being made in global wash that are frankly going nowhere and not lasting, it's really disheartening, it's really sad. And a lot of Splash's approach and focus on sustainability, really starting with the end in mind, is informed by that very statistic. We are doing everything that we can to buck this trend and provide lasting solutions that give the ongoing support that schools really need. As my colleague Kelbessa will speak about in a little bit, government support and buy-in is critical for the sustainability of effective wash in schools programs. Really, this is not a Splash program, this is a government program at government schools. We're providing technical assistance and support, but the long-term success of this is based upon that government support and buy-in. We are fortunate to have really strong government partnerships everywhere we work, but it's a challenge every day. There are many, many priorities in these places and many different people being pulled different ways, so we're really trying to stay at the front of their minds and keep the wash in schools need a reality for them. In fact, it is our goal to turn over the long-term ownership of these projects to local government. In addition to close government partnerships, we ensure that all of our work is led by local teams of Splash employees, as evidenced by Kelbessa and also my colleague Dawit, who is here joining us today. He is also a leader of our work in Addis and has really been foundational for the success of that program over the past many years. Taking a step back for a minute, where does Splash work generally? The video hinted at this and what we've accomplished to date, where we focused our efforts. In short, we focus on the places with the world's highest population density. Here in this circle, and just outside of it, over there in East Africa and Ethiopia, is where we focused our work. Splash has worked in 8 countries over the past 10 years, and we've focused broadly thus far on child-serving institutions. So that includes hospitals, shelters, orphanages, and of course, schools. I think the video stated that we were serving 430,000 children every day. That video was made a year ago. It's now 436,000 kids at over 1,700 sites. 436,000 kids, that's enough people that if we were focused in the United States, we'd be considered the 58th largest water utility in the nation by number of daily users. China was our first major attempt at scale. Our goal was to provide clean, safe drinking water at every orphanage in the country. And if you've ever heard about Splash before, you might already know the anecdote that our work in orphanages is really how we got started. Our founder, Eric, was working with families who were adopting children internationally, and particularly from orphanages in China. And he found himself really obsessed with the poverty dichotomy when he was visiting these orphanages. He noticed that there were McDonald's and multinational corporations that could serve paying customers on the same street as an orphanage that was serving dirty water in baby bottles. And this is where Splash was born. 10 years later, we finally reached our goal of clean water at every orphanage in the country. We've installed clean water systems at over 1,050 orphanages across 31 provinces in China. So we're now working to establish a long-term multi-provider third-party maintenance network, including a robust spare parts supply chain. We want to keep these filters working for years to come. Our goal is also to transition financial responsibility of these filters for the service and maintenance of them to the government, so that these baby bottles are only ever filled with safe, clean drinking water. But our work in orphanages was just the beginning. We're now taking our success with scale and applying that to schools. This is where we're headed. In Addis Ababa, Ethiopia on the left, and Kolkata, India on the right, approximately 1/3 of residents live in slum conditions. This is why we're focusing the vast majority of our organizational efforts over the next 5 years on these two cities. Our newest initiative is called Project WISE, which stands for Wash in Schools for Everyone. I realize it's an acronym within an acronym. There's probably some rule about that, but in the world of NGOs, we just pile on the acronyms. Over the next 5 years, Splash aims to reach 100% of government schools in Kolkata, India, and Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, with clean water, clean toilets, and kids with clean hands. That's 450 schools, all those little blue dots on the left map, and over 1,200 schools in Kolkata, the even tinier blue dots on the right side. We believe that if we can achieve this scale in these two very different megacities, that we are laying the foundation for a model that can be replicated by governments elsewhere. Again, that's 1,200 schools in Kolkata, India's third largest city, considered by many to be one of the hardest cities to execute in India. Splash is determined to demonstrate that scale is possible in Kolkata, to articulate the strongest possible case for cost-effective replication across the country. Splash is already working in approximately 150 of these Kolkata schools, so we have a lot to do in the next 5 years to get to 1,200. And here in Addis, the goal is 450 schools, building upon the 80 or so schools that we're currently working in. Dawit could probably give me that exact number because it changes every week, but 80 is roughly what I last heard. By focusing on improved wash infrastructure, changed behavior, and strengthened school-based menstrual hygiene management, another acronym for you, MHM, Menstrual Hygiene Management. I'm sure you're all going to be going home and talking to your family and friends about menstrual hygiene management. We believe that we can achieve the ultimate desired impacts, all the way over here on the right, of healthier students and better school attendance, especially for girls. We want kids to have better opportunities in life by being healthier and attending school more and achieving better educational outcomes. So we intend to achieve this for the benefit of nearly 1 million kids in these two cities within the next 5 years. So I'd now like to invite my colleague, Kelbessa Wordofa, to come up and talk a little bit about his experiences growing up in Addis and what brought him to Splash, as well as some more details about Ethiopia and our work there. Kelbessa?
Thank you, Kara, and good evening to all of you again. Yeah, as I was introduced at the beginning of this session, I have an experience of more than 20 years working with international organizations, World Vision, Save the Children, World Vision, Save the Children, and TIRF and the UK. Before joining the NGO sector, I also served with the government of Ethiopia for Ministry of Finance and Economic Development for 8 years. And then after that, I joined the non-profit sector. My experience expands from my own country in Ethiopia, and then other East African countries, Sudan, South Sudan, Eastern Congo, and last year also in Iraq, in the Middle East. By academic, I am an economist. I did my first degree in Addis Ababa University, my postgraduate diploma in The Hague, the Netherlands, in population and development, and then my second degree in applied economics in Vienna, Austria. The reason why I am very much interested in joining Splash is it is a coincidence of two things. One is my own family interest. As I said, I served in outside of my country in East Africa and the Middle East for about 10 years. And then it was about a time when I said, my family and myself, we said, oh, enough is enough, no more living separately. Then I started browsing around for opportunities. And when I saw the Splash project director role, and I read the details of what a Splash does, the theory of change like she presented, the focus on children, the focus on the health of children in school, the programs they designed in Addis Ababa, a very big place where I grew up. Then I said, yeah, this is very, very good program. I want to be part of this very big agenda of transforming WASH programming in school, in the entire schools that are public schools in Addis Ababa. So I found the opportunity really very career enriching, very kind of, I just believe that I will get quite a lot of job satisfaction out of it. As somebody who grew up just in the area of Addis Ababa and going to school in Addis, and my final settlement also being in Addis, so it is natural that I said, oh, my own interest and the professional passion met at that junction. So I joined the Splash just last month. And so this is my second month with the Splash. So that is the story behind it. So maybe Kera presented quite a lot of general, very global situations, sometimes also touching on specific cases of Ethiopia, India, and other countries. Maybe my speech will focus more on my own country, Ethiopia, the program there, what is the situation, and what is the prospect, challenges, and opportunities that are there. Maybe you might have heard about Ethiopia, where it is, and how big or how small it is. In brief, Ethiopia is located in the Horn of Africa, and it is the biggest, the second biggest country in terms of population. There are more than 100 million people living in the country. So it makes it is the second populous country in Africa, following Nigeria. It is a landlocked country. I think maybe the majority of you might have heard about the longest African civil war in the 90s, 80s, and even in the 70s. Which concluded into the separation of Eritrea from Ethiopia. So that is how Ethiopia became a landlocked country. This is a country which has, which is half of the population of the country being less than 18 years old, and even those people in the 20s and the 30s. We have a lot of unemployment, young unemployment challenge. This is a country which, for which what we export cannot cover what we import. And what is raised as a domestic revenue by the government cannot cover what the government spends. And the gross domestic product of the country per head is less than 800, I guess it's about 800 or 700, is anyway less than 1,000, which means if you translate into monthly income, it is less than 100 per month. So the conventional way is annual. So annually, our GDP or gross domestic product is less than 1,000. The other thing is that the economy is still predominantly very agrarian economy, which means it is dominated by agriculture. The manufacturing industry and the service sector is still yet to grow. It is true that it is the economy is in process of transformation, but we still are going to go long way before we have a very good proportion between manufacturing industry, the service sector, and the agricultural production. So generally, this is the macroeconomic situation of the country. Other statistics is that we have a lot of challenges in terms of rural to urban migration. So many people every year migrate from the rural areas to Addis Ababa mainly, and to also other urban areas. We have a big population in Addis Ababa, and about 80% of the total population live in slum areas. And we have also a challenge of pollution, which is caused by pollutant industrial activities like tanneries, textile industries, food processing. All of these contribute to pollution in the city. According to the Ethiopia's health sector transformation program, one of the challenges that we have right now is diarrhea, which is believed to be the second biggest killer for under 5 children. And the first killer is a respiratory infection, but diarrhea is the second biggest killer. And being the implication is that what Splash is doing right now in the city is believed to contribute to reduction of deaths caused by diarrhea and other basic health facilities like factors. The other statistics is that 23% of the cause of under 5 mortality in the country is again due to diarrhea in terms of specifying the number. So that is why we say for all of these challenges, most of these challenges, WASH is the solution. We have challenges that I would like to summarize for you so that you can grasp what the outstanding challenges are there. The first challenge I can mention to you is limitation of funding in the face of competing priorities. We have quite a lot of priorities by the government and by NGOs. We have, as I said, the need for transforming the economy. We have the need to transforming the structure of the macroeconomy. We have the priority for expanding job opportunities, creating microfinance, and then WASH will be one of these priorities, and it is a very key priority. The other challenge we have is the importance of WASH. We believe it is not getting the attention and the recognition that it deserves. So that is why we are, as a Splash, we are going to work quite a lot in terms of convincing the public sector, the private sector, the community, the government officials, so that WASH gets the importance and the focus that it needs to get. The other challenge we have is limitation in terms of local ownership and the implementation capacity. When we do, on the basis of some of the assessments done by other NGOs and the Splash itself, there is a very clear indication that we need to work more in terms of ensuring local ownership by the community, ownership by local administration, ownership by civil societies in the city. I think that is very important. The other is, as I said, is implementation capacity. When we say implementation capacity, it could be expertise, it could be skills, it could be applied knowledge, and also sense of accountability. That is part of implementation capacity. The other challenge we have is there is a lot of need, as I said, but the framework for coordinating all of these efforts by all the actors that are planning and the programming to do WASH activities is there. Everyone is doing something, and the coordination aspect is lacking. So Splash is working with a number of bureaus, a number of government offices like Office for Education, for Health, for Finance, and the construction to kind of do something that has a very strong coordination, something that can culminate into broader impact, in a coordinated impact that is almost going to serve as a model that can kind of initiate, influence policy practice, influence change in systems in the public sector, in the NGO sector. That is what Splash is doing. And currently we have programming along that. So in terms of opportunities, as I said, coordination is going on, and the Splash is working with different bureaus. The program that Splash is going to implement in the coming 4 years is going to be financed 50% of it by the government. This is one of the things that really attracted me when I applied for the position, and when I was told in the course of the interview process, I found out, oh, this program is going to be funded, half of it by the government. I said, really? And then I asked the country director, he said, no. I asked, oh, is it in writing? So this is a very big opportunity. And it is also an indication of the level of commitment from the government. And from my interaction in the last few weeks when I was in Addis, and the discussions that I participated in along with David, their interest is not only just Addis, and they want this program to be a model. So they want to prove that implementing WASH programming in school is very effective. And if it turns out to be very effective, they want to replicate the model to states outside of Addis, the entire country, because we have different states outside of Addis, and I think the regional governors are waiting for the impact of this programming so that they can also say, oh yeah, come to our region, come to our states, so that we can also contribute 50% of it. I think that is very impressive, but I've been saying to my colleagues, yeah, quite a lot is also expected from us, so we have to be very ready to live up to that expectation. Another very interesting, very new development is that the government is now very keen to improve the facilities, not only WASH, also other social service in Addis. And I don't know how many of you know, Addis is the third most important hub in the whole world after New York and Geneva. So in Africa, people say that Addis is Africa's Geneva or New York. So now as government and the public sector, everyone is saying, yes, Addis is the third most the important hub, but do we have that quality facilities of WASH and other services? So the determination, the movement right now is to make a real third hub, not only just for the sake of ranking, but a hub that kind of be considered as a real third important hub. So because of that, very recently the government has formed a steering committee consisting of different government offices, and NGOs are also members, especially in the technical committees. So there is a move to coordinate, to kind of work together and coordinate all actors on WASH so that Addis Ababa can be transformed. And there is a steering committee, and the steering committee is led by the municipality of the city, and then the Bureau of Education is a deputy chairperson, and I believe, this is my understanding, the SPLASH program influenced I think the appointment of the Bureau of Education to become the chairperson for this steering committee to transform WASH programming in the entire city and maybe in due course of time in the entire country. That is the level of commitment we see. The government is now, the awareness is very strong, they are very committed. 50% is not an easy contribution, as I mentioned. I think that is what is going on. And maybe at the end of it, I think it is very important to share with you the story of a SPLASH program impact. And in this story, we will see a film on composed on a girl called Salam by name, and please enjoy it.
የቤተሰብ አባላቶች እኔና ባለቤቴ 7 ወንድ ናት።
ስሜ ሰላማዊት መኮንን፣ እድሜ 14። በንጽህና ውስጥ ለ2 ዓመት ከስልጠና በኋላ ያየሁት ለውጥ፣ በተለይ ደግሞ አሁን እየተስፋፋ ሲመጣ ተማሪዎች ማለት እጃቸውን ሳይታጠቡ በጓደኞች ሆነ ለምሳሌ እጃቸውን ሳይታጠቡ ለመብላት ይጸየፋል። ይህ ነገር ክብድ ይላቸዋልና ስለዚህ የበለጠ እውቀት እንዳገኙ
ሰላም ስልጠና ከወሰደች በኋላ ያሳየችው ለውጥ የቤተሰብ ሽንት ቤት መጸዳጃ ቤትና የተከራይ መጸዳጃ ቤት ሽንት ቤት ሰው ቤት እንዲጸዳ አድርጋለች። በየበሩ ማስታወቂያ ትለጥፋለች። እንደገና ለእያንዳንዳቸው ያለ ሳሙና እንዳይታጠቡ በራፍ አስተዳደር ጠዋት ይህን ነግራ ተከራዋና ወደ ትምህርት ቤቷ እንዘ
ስሜ ሀብታሙ ክላም እባላለሁ። በዚህ ትምህርት ቤት በሰራይሽ መጀመሪያ ደረጃ ትምህርት ቤት ውስጥ 5 ዓመት ያክል ቆይቻለሁ። ስፕላሽ ትችላል። በዚህ ትምህርት ቤት በእኛ ትምህርት ቤት ውስጥ በጣም ጥሩ እንቅስቃሴ እያደረገ ነው። ያው ከቅርብ ጊዜ ወዲህ ያው ግቢያችንን አንድ ውበት እንዲላበስ ያደረገ ከለር ነው ማለት እችላለሁ። ልጆቻችን እጃቸውን ሲታጠቡ ከኔ ሳብጀክት ጋር ደግሞ ሞር ስለሚገናኝ ክፍል ውስጥ ማስተምራቸውን ደግሞ በተግባር አፕላይ እንዲያደርጉ ሳሙናን ተጠቅመው እንዴት መታጠብ እንዳለባቸው በጣም ጥሩ ቅስቀሳ እያደረጋለሁ እና እነዚህ ከውባር ውስጥ ያሉ ልጆችም በጣም ጥሩ እንቅስቃሴ እያደረጉ ያሉ ስለሆነ በጣም የሚመሰገን ነው ማለት እችላለሁ። ስፔሻሊ ወደ ከሱ ጋር የሚገናኘው እንደ ልጅ ወደዛ የመጣችበት በዛ ምክንያት ነው ያለው እና ከጤና ጋር የግድ የኛ ሰብጀክት ስለሚገናኝ ከዛ አንጻር ሞር ወደ ቤሎጂ ፎከስ እንድታደርግ አድርጓታል ብዬ እገምታለሁ እና በጣም ታገናኘዋለች።
ወደፊት ሳረግ ትምህርት ስጨርስ መሆን የሚፈልገው ዶክተር ነው። ብዙ ታካሚዎች ማለት ብዙ መታከም የሚፈልጉ በሽተኞች አሉና ሌሎች ትምህርት ቤትም እንደኛ ትምህርት ቤት እንዲሆኑ ሌሎች ብዙ ውሃዎች እንዲያገኙ እንደኛ ተጠቃሚ እንዲሆኑ ይመኛል።
Thank you all so much for being here on, I think today's a Tuesday? Is today Tuesday? Yeah, on a Tuesday night. I mentioned I have a 6-month-old. We're really happy that you came to listen and perhaps to change some of your views or just further inform them about the global water crisis. And maybe from this point forward, when you hear that term, you might think of something different, or you might think of the work that Splash is doing in cities. So thanks to Brett and her team for hosting us, for having us here. Please follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. You can sign up for our monthly newsletter on our website and consider becoming a monthly donor. Because for just $30 a month, you can help ensure that 60 kids have clean water, clean hands, and clean toilets per year. So while the government is matching 50%, there's still 50% to go. It's no small task, but we're really grateful for your generosity of time with us this evening. Thank you.
So at this time, we'll gladly take questions for the speakers. We have about 30 minutes. I just asked, so what will happen is raise your hand and then they'll repeat your question just because you're not going to be able to hear each other. In theory, you can ask anything. I don't know if that's true in practice. So, go ahead.
Yeah, I would imagine when the school implements this, there are demands both on the supply side and the sewage side of the infrastructure. And I wonder if you've run into problems with that and to work through problems outside of the school, providing the water and then taking the sewage appropriately.
Yeah, so the question was about demands on both the school side of things, but also citywide infrastructure like sewage and the municipal supply line.
Yeah, as I said, there is a strong coordination with the government and different government offices are part of this coordination. So when we do the infrastructure, the Bureau of Water and Sewerage, Water Resource and Sewerage is very aware about this. They were consulted during the project proposal, although they are not signatory in the project agreement, they are aware, they are ready to support. And then the construction bureau in the city is a main, one of the major signatories, and Health Bureau is a signatory. So we anticipate that there won't be a kind of a major challenge in terms of implementing the infrastructure to put in place.
Yeah, and I can give 2 examples of ways that has been functionally really challenging for us and what we've done. So on one side of things, it's very expensive to have to build new septic tanks. When Splash is rehabilitating or building new toilets in a school, we want to, if possible, first prioritize the schools that are already on the sewage line. So we've worked with the government partners, as Kelbessa says, to get those citywide sewage maps. And you know, our plan for scale over the next several years is all schools. We're not going to leave any out, but we do have to budget quite differently when it comes to septic versus sewage line. And then I would say we're also putting unintentional additional stress on water supply. As we get more kids to wash their hands, they are taking more water and consuming more water from the schools. So that's been almost a negative side from the perspective of the headmasters and the leaders at each school who have to pay the utility bills. So one of the things that we've also really changed our strategy around in the past couple of years is water storage solutions in each school. Many schools have big water storage tanks. We're tripling the number of water storage tanks that we're installing at each school, and we're getting oftentimes financial contributions from the schools themselves to buy additional water storage tanks, because water shortage is a big problem throughout Addis Ababa. It's a systemic citywide problem. We want to make sure that whenever the water is available, schools are storing it up rather than just relying on that particular valve being turned on a particular day or at a particular time. So it's a great question because we're constantly facing these challenges, and we're aware that we're also putting additional stress on the environment as we're motivating and incentivizing additional water use.
I'm slightly curious as to what Ethiopia's perspective on public sexuality is and how that might have a coordinating issue with people's line of reproductive sources, given that population is an issue, and being able to support a lot of these resources for children and for incoming populations of all over the world, not just Africa.
I could speak at least to, I can't speak to Ethiopia's general stance on it, but I know that for Splash's programming stance, reproductive health is something that we do address through our hygiene club. You kind of saw a little brief part of that on the video. Particularly the work that we do with girls is we teach them about their bodies, we teach them about adolescence and their reproductive health, and we also make sure that boys are informed of this too, because it's not just enough for a girl to know about it. We need to make sure that the teachers are supportive and that the boys at school grow up with this knowledge as well. It's really important to us that we do that in a culturally appropriate way. So we work with our local stakeholders and government partners to tweak that curriculum to be culturally appropriate for each place where we work, and that holds true for Splash globally. I would say that another kind of tension or something that we hold is how we approach gender segregated toilets and kind of topics like that that might have one connotation or meaning here in the US but be addressed differently. We've actually found that it's really important to have gender segregated toilets in places like Addis for people to feel safe and comfortable using them, while in the US the trend is going the other way and having not segregated toilets that actually wouldn't be appropriate in a place like Ethiopia. So it's a great question, and I don't have an easy solution or answer to that, but it's certainly something that we have to consider throughout our programming.
How many people does Splash employ both here in America and in other countries where you do work?
Great question. The question was around how many people Splash employs.
Yeah.
Do you want to take that?
Yeah, maybe on the India side,
Yeah, I can answer first.
In terms of Ethiopia, right now we have around 12 or 13 David staff. But
Average 15 right now.
Yeah, the average of 15. But with the 4-year program that we are going to implement, we are expanding our staffing base. So we maybe end of this year we will have about 40 local staff to work on the implementation, on the coordination, quality assurance, and all of the behavior change activities. We will be having 40 in the coming year. We might also have more staffing.
Yeah, I'd say the answer is about the same. In Seattle, we have around 15 staff right now. We're located in the same building as the Fifth Ave Theater on 5th and Union, and we love having visitors. You're always welcome. We're on the 3rd floor of the Skinner building. We have about 15 staff in Seattle. We are not increasing our headcount as a result of this new project. All of the scale, staffing-wise, that we're doing is in both Kolkata and Addis. So similarly in Kolkata right now, we're at approximately 15 staff. We also work through a local partner in Kolkata, so we'll be staffing up through that local NGO and also adding capacity to our team there. We have about 5 staff in Nepal who've actually recently transitioned to being full-time staff of a local organization. And then all of our work in China has shockingly been done by a handful of people, under 5, some of whom are contract staff. And we're scaling down our permanent presence in China too. Because Splash is not trying to grow our footprint. We're trying to scale up in these cities as we need to implement this work and then draw back down and exit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the question is around who are our primary funders. We actually don't get any Gates Foundation money, which is sort of a surprise to a lot of people here in Seattle. We like to say that we're good thought partners and peers with them. They have a WASH team actually at the Gates Foundation. They really focus on citywide sanitation and toilet initiatives. So we like to bat ideas back and forth. If any of you work at the Gates Foundation, we would love to take your money at any point in time. But practically speaking, part of why we've been able to launch this new project, Project Wise, is because we've been green-lighted for a significant investment from a UK-based foundation called the Children's Investment Fund Foundation. So that's really providing a really solid platform for this particular $40 million 5-year project, along with the government contributions in both cities, and then a variety of other institutional and foundational donors. So there's an organization based out of New York City called Charity Water that funds water work globally. We have strong partnerships with Rotary here in Seattle and elsewhere. We have funding from MIR, which is a store up in Fremont that does a lot of work for them with Splash, and some other Hilton Family Foundation as well. So there's a lot of great foundations out there that are really interested and attracted to funding WASH work, but it's really been kind of a tug of war to get them focused on cities. Their work has traditionally been focused on rural areas, so it's been really exciting for me to see, since I joined Splash 4 years ago, how the tides are turning, and we do have more funding opportunities, but it's a challenge because we don't work in the most attractive cities from their standpoint, maybe where they're used to funding or where they want to fund, so always looking.
Do you have any specific data or knowledge about how improving the bathrooms affects girls' attendance and performance in schools?
Excellent question.
Yeah, definitely.
Question around, do we have data, specific data around how improving bathrooms impacts girls' school attendance and performance? The short answer is no. So we have a ton of anecdotal evidence, and in fact, a lot of our programming and other menstrual health programming globally has been based on the strong belief from a social justice perspective that regardless of any data that may or may not exist, it is really important for girls to feel safe and dignified and comfortable using the bathroom at school. However, we want someone else to prove that that is actually true. So one of the exciting things about Project Wise is that the main funder who is funding this grant for us is separately funding an external evaluation of our work. So over the next 5 years, the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine will be instituting an independent research study on our work, looking specifically at health outcomes around diarrhea and school attendance with a focus on girls. So that's really exciting. We're really excited for the sector to have some hard data in this area, because particularly around WASH, which is so complex and integrated to other disease and economic and societal problems, it's really hard to pinpoint school WASH or something like a toilet as the thing that makes the difference.
Yeah, the intentionality is there, right? Over the coming 4 years, we believe that the way we implement our programming should positively impact the performance of students in general, especially the performance of girl children. I think that is what we are going to kind of have factual data over the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you for a very informative presentation. I enjoyed the videos especially. I was curious to hear if and how Splash plans to address emerging contaminants that disproportionately affect children outside of diarrheal waterborne pathogens. For instance, my research is on geogenic groundwater contaminants like fluoride and arsenic, many of which are really prevalent in the regions that you've mentioned, including China, West Bengal, India, and all along the Rift Valley, including Ethiopia. So I'm curious, do you pick schools and sites where they're not sourcing groundwater that has any contaminants outside of biological pathogens, or how would you address it if in the annual test you started to see other contaminants?
It's a really key question for us, because as we talked about earlier, safe water is really the foundation of the bedrock of Splash's approach. So water quality testing is a huge part of our efforts in all of the places that we work. We do pre and post testing, so before we actually install a water filtration system or design our water schematic for a particular location, we do at present both chemical and biological contaminant testing. We're also separately doing citywide testing on a somewhat frequent basis every year to a couple of years, taking a sample of schools and locations across that city to really keep our finger on the pulse of those groundwater contaminants. In Nepal, our work has really heavily relied on pre-treatment. We found that there's a lot of iron in water, so we've had to do certain pre-treatment before it's even possible for the water to pass through our system and lead to the results that we want. We have tested for arsenic in West Bengal and Kolkata because it's been known to be a problem elsewhere. We have not found that to be a problem in Kolkata. If we were to find that some of these fluoride, lead, all of these things that we also hear about in the news impacting Seattle and US schools, we would have to adapt our filtration model accordingly. And that's where we're really lucky to have smarter people than myself to help lead that work.
Yeah, maybe to just add a bit to what Kara said, we have also procedures in place in terms of what to do if we do water testing and then we find out
Right,
some
throughout the project.
Yeah, kind of. We have what to do in terms of procedure and process, which may not be practical to be very good. Thank you. But it's a very good question. Yeah.
I'm thinking, from an infrastructure status, what about having plumbers and contractors and people in secondary education kids going into technical schools who, aren't going to go onto a college practice? Can you have some education departments for that? I mean, in this country, I can call up one of, I don't know how many in Seattle plumbers, my sewage gets blocked up.
Yeah.
But I don't know, and it also goes to your task to get somebody out there fixing those toilets and whatever every day, and being able to continue on, maybe even becoming entrepreneurs who own their own little plumbing business for the rest of the city.
Do you want to come work for Splash? The question is around maintenance and service networks, and also perhaps the possibility of educating youth. I think Kelbessa spoke about the staggering rate of the population that is under the age of 18 and the employment problems in Addis. We're actually trying to figure that out right now. Our dream is that if this maintenance network doesn't already exist, and I'd say in most of the cases where we work it doesn't, we want to help establish that Splash would not be responsible for managing or running long term, but work with local entrepreneurs and people who have the desire to build out that type of service network so that we can consistently connect schools to those types of entities. And really, perhaps that's a way that we can spread our impact beyond the school walls to the community and be a place to provide additional employment for the children as they grow up. And in fact, we just got a really exciting grant to work on that very exact thing in Ethiopia over the next 3 years as part of this project.
Yeah. This is a very good question.
So I said, you want to come work? You're just like...
Yeah, that is part of our sustainability programming. As Kara said, we have quite a lot of people graduating from technical school in Addis. The government is very key to create jobs for these young people. So right now we are kind of trying to figure out how to link the schools in the future in terms of making an arrangement for them so that they can get very sustainable kind of long-term service provision and suppliers locally. There is also an intention of maybe working around social enterprise, which could kind of link these potential service suppliers and the providers with the schools. So it is something which is already under our radar to figure out how to link up the process. So this is a very excellent question.
So I'm incredibly impressed with the amount of work that you're able to do being an alt-orphanage in China, the work that the government's so excited about. So I'm interested to hear a little bit more about what is it about Splash that makes it so attractive for people to get on board with it, right? What is it? Because we've had many people come in and talk about trying to get countries on board or trying to get local governments or just individuals on board with new hygiene habits or just new ways of doing things. And Splash seems to have hit on a model that's pretty engaging. So yeah.
I feel like Dawid is the one who's often sitting outside our government official or his government officials' offices with paper in hand. I can answer for myself, and I would love to pass that to you. From my perspective, as somebody who represents Splash, isn't on the ground doing the work, but is fortunate to work with those who are, I think what really has hit the nail on the head is our particular clear focus and mission. I've worked for other organizations in the past that have really dabbled in lots of different areas and had great, strong program models, but haven't been able to refine those models over time because they sometimes get pulled in a new direction. So your compliments are well received and we're grateful for them, but they've come at the cost of 10 years of trial and error, but focusing consistently on kids, on cities, and on child-serving institutions. So along the way, we've really applied that user design mindset to figure out what's the need and how can we best provide a really useful solution, and been able to iterate on that over time. But I think it's because we've really always kept our focus on water, cities. We've added in hygiene and sanitation because it doesn't make sense to try to achieve a health impact without those things, but we've really put a pretty clear box around ourselves intentionally.
Yeah, I think maybe at least from the perspective of what I know in Addis or in Ethiopia, I think one thing that is making Splash very acceptable with the government is the approach. The approach, especially on accountability issue, on the effectiveness of working with the children, then children affecting or impacting their family. That is, I think, one component that is making it very attractive to them. The other thing is when we had last week with a meeting with the government, and we were talking with the head of Education Bureau, and he was telling that the government does not have a kind of challenge in terms of availing some budgets. And he said that the challenge is how to put the resources at hand to the best use and to the right use for the community. Which is by implication, although we are mentioning, okay, limitation of funding, whatever, the government themselves are admitting that the issue is not as such the limitation of only the limitation of resources. It is the issue of implementation capacity. It is the issue of putting in place very strong monitoring and accountability framework, which I think they have seen in Splash, to come in, to join them, and to work and to prove to the community that this can be done. So that is, I think, the reason why they like to work with Splash, and maybe the donors are also seeing in Splash that
we don't run from our mistakes. We tend to put them out in front of us, and that really attracts some people and it turns some people off, but I think for the right people, it's the right approach.
Yeah. The other question? Okay.
You mentioned the risk of diarrhea for children under the age of 5. Would you work in the school age populations? Are you gathering any data on the positive benefits for younger siblings?
The data we get is not directly from the education sector, it is from the health sector. But in terms of if what we do can impact younger siblings of the students, yes, that is, we can say yes. It is only actually not only the younger sibling or older sibling, even the parents, in terms of behavior change, we believe, we anticipate that they will be impacted very positively, and we believe that can be translated into reducing the diarrhea and other waterborne diseases.
Yeah, and while Splash isn't collecting that primary data ourselves, it's certainly a question that we're asking ourselves often, and we found that through some citywide surveys that we've done about what's happening at the household level, many of these households are already accessing clean water through their own means. So they're already incentivized in many cases to secure or procure or pay for clean drinking water. When I was mentioning the Sustainable Development Goal earlier and saying that this is meant for the benefit of all, it's actually common that NGOs and organizations like UNICEF and the World Health Organization and other governmental programs focus on the household, and they forget about what happens when a kid goes to school. So while we know that our model isn't filling all of the gaps in terms of what is needed for kids under 5, we're really trying to make sure that when those children do go to school, they're drinking clean water, and trying to instill in the kids the behaviors that they'll influence their little siblings and their families with. But it's a really hard question, because how do you get the most people the fastest with this really important intervention?
I'm concerned about, it looks like the model is to have the water's coming in from a public water source, and then there's the filter system. And I just think, or I'm just concerned that it might be hard. How do you get the fresh filters and the supply to make sure that they're changing the filters supposed to, and how can they get the filters, so how does that work?
So the questions about the supply chain and the filters themselves, we were just discussing that today.
Yeah.
How many shipments and how many warehouses we need to be able to deploy this intervention across an entire city or two cities. One of the important things about the technology that we have selected is we've selected it in part because there's relatively little maintenance needed compared to some other filtration technology. So most of the parts don't need to be changed except for maybe once every 3 to 5 years or sometimes even longer. So Splash is not only procuring the equipment that's needed right off the bat, but we start to work with schools from the start to understand the long-term cost of that upkeep. We want them to not be surprised 5 years down the road when the carbon needs to be replaced. And we're really dedicated to making sure that they have their own independent access to the local supplier network to change out the carbon filter or the UF membrane over time. And it's something that right now at present Splash is making that long-term commitment for sites. So any institution where we've secured clean water in the past, we have made sure to support that location until they've been able to take it on themselves. We've not walked away from any of our projects. But how we do that across the city really goes back to some of the questions around a potential social enterprise and developing networks of entrepreneurs who can sell these types of items, not only to the schools, but perhaps to other paying customers in those cities, like other hotels and other corporations.
Yeah, I think from the point of sustainability, this is a very key question. And right now we are getting the supplies. And we Splash also provides support in terms of spare parts and maintenance, capacity building, as well as parts supply for in the short run.
Yeah.
But in the long run, we are now discussing how to ensure the sustainability of this service. Maybe in 10 years or even 5 years, some of these filters might become very too old to continue serving. So I think we still have some time to plan on that in terms of ensuring local supplier, or maybe as she mentioned, organizing social enterprise activities that can kind of create a local dynamics in terms of the supplying the parts, even the filters themselves. So this is also very important for us, and it is one of our focus areas.
So we'll take one or two more questions, so we'll go ahead with the one that's up.
Thinking back to your original slide of the girl with a big jug of water on her head, do you find kids taking water home from school? Do they bring the jug from home and carry it back home? Okay.
Yeah. Have you seen that? You've been to some of our schools in the past couple of weeks that you've been at Splash.
Yes. Let me be very clear about the question. Is the question about girl children carrying water from school to their home, or
do we see any of the kids taking Splash water home with them?
Right.
I've seen it, yes. In fact, a recent school that I was at, I was watching, it was the end of the day, and kids were coming out of the classroom, and on their way out of the schoolyard, they were stopping at the Splash water station and filling up water bottles, because that's sort of the common practice. In Nepal, we actually have piloted a program whereby we've sold excess water capacity to surrounding communities at a low-cost structure to try to encourage that very thing to happen. We know that kids are taking water home, so we're also trying to think about how do we make that as safe as possible so that the water that they're bringing home and transporting in sometimes dirty bottles isn't actually leading to bigger problems. But it's something that we wish we could scale at an even bigger rate, but with some of the water shortage challenges in Addis, we also have to temper those ambitions for at least the present moment.
So we've got time for one last question.
How much do you have to tailor your approach depending on different countries?
The question is around how much we have to tailor our approach. I would say that 80% of our approach is actually the same, and that remaining 20 is what has to be tailored, but that remaining 20 is often what is the hardest part to tailor. The curriculum itself is easy. The hygiene program, we work with the local government, they endorse it, and it really becomes their hygiene program curriculum. What's more challenging is different rainy and dry seasons, different school schedules, different holiday schedules, just the pure logistics of implementing in a scaled approach across megacities and the transportation challenges and all of that. But I'd say from a culture and customs perspective, obviously we adapt the lessons and the curriculum as needed, but actually it isn't something that has been as challenging as you might think that it would be, which is what gives us a lot of great hope for us to create this replicable model that, with that 20% customization, could also be successful elsewhere.
Okay, I have one last question. I want to hear this hygiene song. Can you guys hear the hygiene song?
Don't wait. Maybe if you want to hear the hygiene song, a small group of us could stand in the corner after this, and Dolly may or may not be willing to sing it for us. I only know the tune. I admitted that I don't know the words, so I'm certainly not the person you want. And I think I could do some of the hand motions fairly well if I had a backup singer, because you want to make sure you not only get your thumbs, but that you get under your fingernails and your wrists. It's an important thing.
So the songs are then maybe next time. Next year.
I wish we had that in the video, yeah.
I have taped the kids in the schools doing it and put that as part of.
We should. I have it on my cell phone, so maybe we can pull it up.